see a UFO. I thought if I did, that it would really mean something, that I'd really know about something. That turned out to be true, not in the way I thought it would. It's been 3 months since the invasion. Well, 3 months from the time the first of the confirmed UFOs appeared. No one knows anything for sure. But I remember those days and nights 3 months ago. Not such a long time. So much has happened since, and things will never be the same again. At first it was so exciting when the ships appeared. It was all over the news that morning. It was chaos everywhere, but most people tried to carry on as usual. I spent the whole day watching the TV in the skies. I spotted my first UFO that afternoon. There were actually a group of 3. The classic silver saucer shapes in tight V formation, flying low and clearly visible, but moving at great speed from north to south. It was incredible. My mind was racing. What does this mean? Who are they? And what do they want? The answers to all those questions never came. Not from the spaceships or whatever controlled them. But within a week of the first sightings, there were signs that something was up. In the beginning, it was put down to this contact with something alien. Of course things were going to change. How could we carry on as usual? We were suddenly not alone. Were we being colonized or invaded? We used ideas from our own history as analogy. The various religious groups jumped in on the act. What this meant for a concept of God and our basis for any personal spirituality. Each religious group claimed some privilege. Most agreed with similar conclusions about signs from the heavens, a wonderful future for all life. The truth was, they were as scared as anyone about their claim to a position in the universe's order. The aliens, if that's what they are, were keeping their intentions to themselves. All attempts at contact were completely ignored. In that first week, there was an unexpected rise in panic, manifesting as civil disobedience, like looting and violent behaviour, basic lawlessness. A lot of people stopped turning up for work, driving away from the city centres, staying up all night, many partying. It was me again, packed the churches, or some who arranged meetings, attempting to make a buck. This early frenzy stopped almost as quickly as it began, as did the daily and nightly appearances of the UFOs, which no longer flew across the land in a crisscross pattern. They ruled the skies. It was beautiful and frightening, sublime. With the ships suddenly gone, everything seemed to go quiet. We were on our own again, abandoned. That was the feeling. Something was over, and the universe we sat in had in the most confronting way become that gigantic, cold place it really was. And we became specks in an endless space. We were unequivocally so very alone. Then things started to fall apart. It was hard to put your finger on it at first, but something had changed, had shifted in the world. Well, at first we thought it was the world, but then and when it was probably too late, we realized it wasn't the world that had changed, but we had changed. We had all changed in our own ways. Something had shifted in our minds and in our perceptions. The invasion had triggered something in our heads that was probably always there, a part of our thinking that kept everything together, that stopped us thinking too deeply or too realistically, a combination of connections, chemicals and charges that kept our thoughts and perceptions on an even balance, so we can get up in the mornings and keep going all through the day, that keeps one foot stepping ahead of the other and allows us to be with other people, to communicate with them and move on and do all the small tasks we do every day without thinking about any of them. It took about a month for anyone to realize that that function in the brain was slowly being dismantled, and the uninhibited chatter of the mind was starting to overcome every effort by anyone to suppress its flooding and overwhelming. If this was an invasion, it was unlike any in human history, and it exposed us for the animals we were, still mere infants connected and vulnerable to our primitive past. Our pretense of being civilized and advanced was being exposed and exploited so easily. There were no aliens to speak of, and certainly no aliens with ray guns, no demonstrations of destructive power, no huge explosions of any kind. No, the weapon being used to good effect this time was one that lay within us all, though somehow locked safe in our heads, with the self-doubt and questions of existence, and the plain all-out fear of being we kept under control. If this was an invasion, it seemed to be working. And what was the purpose of this invasion? To take over the earth? I doubt it. The world had already gotten pretty bad. We were really fucking the earth up. Not just the natural environment either. Socially, things were getting out of hand, with wars and the economy. The weather was out of control, and basically, most people were also morally bankrupt. Maybe we were being executed, punished, or just being put out of our miseries. It was always believed that an answer would come from the skies. All the crazy UFO groups believing in benign aliens. Watch the skies, they said, and now they've come. Look out for a sign. Now they have come. It all seems stupid. Maybe they were always here. Maybe this started a long time ago. Whatever. The UFO groups never predicted this. When things started falling apart, mainly from people just staying home, some scientists started to question what was happening. A small group of them started investigating what the spaceships were possibly up to. Were they just presenting a sign in the sky, or was it something else, more sinister? It was difficult to get the information, as whatever was happening started happening more. Everything became more difficult to access. The effects were not the same on everyone. I noticed that artists and creative types like myself seemed the least affected, and we could still meet up and discuss things. But ironically, we were fairly dysfunctional at actually making anything happen. One of the last bunch of real reports that were broadcast were about some findings made by the scientists. They had made some comparative tests on the atmosphere, comparing the air of today and some they pulled out of the ground. And even though they did not say the evidence was conclusive, or that they were in any fit state themselves to decipher the results, they were fairly certain they had detected a microscopic difference in the samples. Although it was inconclusive, it seemed the ships were up to something. Seeding our atmosphere was something, and that something, it seemed, was difficult to pinpoint. And as it stands now, will probably never be known. Whatever it was affected the mind, and it just infected everyone and everything with any self-awareness, which was an odd thing. Most animals seemed unaffected. It was only the increasing neglect by humans that led to their distress. We all became consumed by an overwhelming feeling of doom, or maybe not doom, but an awful alienation and sense of pointlessness. It is a feeling of utter separateness, complete desolate loneliness. Such a dreadful heaviness seemed to descend and engulf every conscious person. The sign that everything had shifted came dramatically in the second month. Mass suicides by organized religious groups occurred over 1 week, and for probably longer, but by then a newspaper or television report was difficult to access. Any scrap of information or news just fed the emotional crisis, and then, as if by the hand of God, the electricity dramatically failed. The world became a dark place, illuminated only by the uncaring moon and stars above, and the uncontrolled fires burning below. The cities were burning, and no one could raise the passion to fight them. People gradually withdrew from each other. Suicide was a frequent universal act. Those that could not fend for themselves died from their neglect. By the start of the 3rd month, there was barely a movement detectable anywhere. I had stopped caring and found it increasingly difficult to get up. I no longer felt the need for the company of others. The opposite was more true. I wanted to be alone. I knew I was dying like everything else. The last minuscule parts of myself that could have held up any sense of hope were by now so submerged by a tide of abject despair that somehow failed to crave death. For taking my own life had now become an act of selfishness, and any part of what was considered self had vanished, evaporated. The world had become quiet. The chatter of human activity had ceased. It was probably very beautiful, but I didn't care. Nothing can save me now. I think it's all over.